Tech billionaire Grayson Lockwood never expected to find his 4 identical sons, or their mother, Rosa, the maid who vanished 12 years ago. Secrets from their past threaten their future. Can love and truth heal old wounds before it's too late? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Grayson Lockwood stood in front of the mirror in his penthouse apartment, fixing his designer tie. At 41, he had everything money could buy, except a family. The magazines called him America's most eligible bachelor, but deep down he was just lonely. "Mr. Lockwood, your car is ready," his assistant called through the intercom. Another weekend getaway to escape the pressure of running his tech empire. This time, he'd chosen a quiet beach town called Silver Cove. The drive was peaceful until he passed by Jefferson Park. Something made him tell his driver to stop. Maybe it was the sound of children laughing, or maybe it was just fate. He stepped out of the car, breathing in the salty air. A group of young boys was playing soccer, their energy filling the afternoon with joy. But as Grayson watched them, his heart started racing. One of the boys kicked the ball, and when he smiled, Grayson felt like he was looking in a mirror. All 4 boys had the same dark green eyes as him, the same strong jaw. Even the way they moved reminded him of himself at that age. It wasn't just coincidence, it couldn't be. Then he saw her, Rosa Alvarez. She was sitting on a bench watching the boys play. She looked different from when she'd worked as his maid 12 years ago, but he'd never forget her face. She'd been kind to him during one of the darkest times of his life, right after his engagement fell apart. Then one day, she'd disappeared. Without saying goodbye, "Rosa?" His voice made her freeze. She turned slowly, her eyes wide with fear. "Mr. Lockwood," she whispered. "What are you doing here?" "Those boy—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The truth was already forming in his mind. "Mom!" one of the boys called out. "Can we get ice? Cream?" "Mom." The word hit Grayson like a punch to the stomach. "How old are they?" he asked, his voice shaking. 11, Rosa answered, standing up straighter. "They're 11 years old." 11 years. Right after she'd left his employment. Right after he'd stored those embryos at the fertility clinic during his engagement to Charlotte. "We need to talk," he said. Rosa shook her head. "There's nothing to talk about, please just go." But Grayson couldn't go. Not now. Not when he was looking at 4 boys who could be his sons. He pulled out his phone and called the one person he trusted. "Mike Santos, his private investigator. I need you to look into something for me," he said, watching as Rosa gathered the boys to leave. "It's about a fertility clinic from 11 years ago, and Rosa Alvarez." That night, Grayson couldn't sleep. He cancelled his plans to leave town and checked into the Silver Cove Inn. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those boys' faces, their smiles, their eyes, his eyes. The next morning, Mike called with news that changed everything. "I found the records," Mike said. "There was a mix-up at the clinic. The embryos you stored, and they weren't destroyed like you thought. They were implanted in a surrogate, Rosa Alvarez." Grayson sat down hard on the hotel bed. "All this time, there's more." Mike continued. "The clinic tried to contact you, but there was an administrative error. The messages never reached you." The truth hit him like a tidal wave. He had 4 sons, 4 11-year-old boys who'd grown up without him. And Rosa, she'd raised them alone, probably thinking he'd abandoned them on purpose. He looked out the window at the peaceful beach town. His life would never be the same, but first he had to convince Rosa to let him be part of their lives. And that would be the hardest thing he'd ever done. Looking at his reflection in the hotel mirror, Grayson made a promise to himself. He would prove to Rosa that he wasn't the cold-hearted businessman she thought he was. He would show her, and his sons, that he could be the father they deserved. But as he watched the sun rise over Silver Cove, he had no idea just how much love, pain, and healing lay ahead, or how the woman who'd kept this secret would end up stealing his heart in ways he never expected. Rosa couldn't sleep that night. She sat at her small kitchen table, looking at old photographs of her boys, Lucas, Mateo, Santiago, and Diego, her miracles. She remembered the day she found out she was carrying 4 babies. The doctor had suggested reducing the number for a safer pregnancy, but Rosa couldn't do it. She'd protect all of them no matter what. The next morning there was a knock at her door. Rosa knew who it was before she opened it. "We need to talk," Grayson said. He looked different from the businessman she remembered. His expensive suit was replaced with casual clothes, and his eyes were red from lack of sleep. "The boys are at school," she said, stepping aside to let him in. Her small house was nothing like his luxury penthouses, but it was filled with love and memories. "I know about the clinic, Rosa, about the mix-up." Grayson's voice was soft. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rosa sat down on her worn couch. "What was I supposed to say?" "Hello, Mr. Lockwood. Remember those embryos you didn't want? Well, surprise." She wiped away a tear. "You were always so distant, so cold. I couldn't risk you taking them away. From me. I would never—" Grayson started but stopped. Would he have? Back then, he might have. He'd been a different person. "Tell me about them," he said instead. Rosa's face softened. "Lucas is the oldest, by 2 minutes. He's the responsible one, always looking out for his brothers. Mateo is our artist. He fills sketchbooks with his drawings. Santiago is the comedian, always making everyone laugh. And Diego," she smiled, "Diego is the dreamer. He wants to build robots. Just like me," Grayson finished. "They're good boys," Rosa said. "I've tried to give them everything they need." "On a housekeeper's salary?" Grayson asked, looking around at the modest home. Rosa's eyes flashed. "Money isn't everything, Mr. Lockwood. They have love, respect, and good values." Grayson stood up and walked to the wall covered in school certificates and drawings. "They're brilliant," he said, reading the academic awards. "All of them." "They get that from you," Rosa admitted quietly. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Grayson turned to her. "I want to be part of their lives, Rosa. Please, let me try." Rosa looked at him for a long moment. "If I say yes, there have to be rules. You can't just sweep in with expensive gifts and trips, trying to buy their love. And you can't tell them who you are. Not yet. They need time to know you first." "Anything." Grayson agreed. "I'll do it however you want." Just then, they heard voices outside. The school bus was dropping the boys off. "Mom, we're home," Lucas called out as they burst through the door. The boys stopped short when they saw Grayson. "Boys," Rosa said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "This is Mr. Lockwood. He's an old friend who's visiting our town." The boys looked at him curiously. Diego's eyes widened as he recognized him from TV. "You're the tech guy," he exclaimed, "the one who made the smart robots." Grayson smiled, his heart aching at seeing them up close. "That's right. Would you like to hear about them?" "Would I?" Diego rushed to sit next to him, while his brothers gathered around more cautiously. Rosa watched as Grayson began explaining robotics in simple terms the boys could understand. She saw how naturally they responded to him, how their eyes lit up with the same passion she'd once seen in his. Later, when the boys went to do their homework, Grayson turned to Rosa. "Thank you," he said softly. "Don't make me regret this," she warned. As Grayson left that evening, he made a decision. He called his office and cancelled all his meetings for the next month. Silver Cove had a small tech company that was struggling. He'd buy it, he decided, giving himself a reason to stay in town. What he didn't expect was how watching Rosa with the boys would affect him. She was different from the quiet maid he remembered. As a mother, she was strong, loving, and fiercely protective. Each time she smiled at their sons, his heart beat a little faster. But Rosa kept her distance, building invisible walls between them. She had secrets of her own, like the real reason she'd agreed to be a surrogate all those years ago. Secrets. That could change everything if Grayson ever discovered them. News traveled fast in Silver Cove. Within days, everyone knew that billionaire Grayson Lockwood had bought the struggling TechWave company. What they didn't know was that he spent more time watching 4 boys play soccer than sitting in business meetings. "You can't just buy a company to stay in town," Rosa said one evening after the boys had gone to bed. She'd found Grayson sitting, on her front porch steps. "Watch me," he replied with a smile that made her heart skip. Besides, those workers needed their jobs. Rosa sat down next to him, keeping careful distance between them. The boys are asking questions about you, especially Diego. He's figured out you're not just some random visitor. They're smart, like their mother. Rosa looked away. Don't do that. Do what? Try to charm me. This isn't about us. It's about them. But it was becoming about them, whether Rosa wanted to admit it or not. Every time Grayson came over, bringing books instead of expensive toys, helping with homework instead of showing off his wealth, she saw a different man from the cold businessman she'd known. One afternoon, everything changed. Lucas was playing in a big soccer game, and Grayson came to watch. In the middle of the game, Lucas collided with another player and went down hard. "Lucas!" Rosa screamed, running onto the field. But Grayson got there first. He scooped Lucas up in his arms, not caring about the dirt staining his $1,000 suit. "I've got you, son," he whispered, then froze, realizing what he'd said. Lucas looked up at him with pain-filled eyes just like his own. "My leg really hurts," he whimpered. At the hospital, Rosa paced the waiting room while Grayson made calls, getting the best orthopedic doctor in the state to come examine Lucas. The other boys sat quietly, scared for their brother. "Mom," Mateo said suddenly, "why does Mr. Lockwood care so much about us?" Rosa's heart stopped. Before she could answer, the doctor came out. "Lucas has a broken leg," he said, "but he'll be fine. He's asking for both of you. Both of you." Rosa and Grayson looked at each other, then walked into Lucas's room together. "Hey, champ," Grayson said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "You called me son," Lucas said. The pain medication made him brave enough to ask what he'd been wondering. "When you carried me. Why?" Rosa grabbed Grayson's hand without thinking. He squeezed it, drawing strength from her touch. "Because—" Grayson started, but Rosa cut him off. "Not now," she whispered. "Not like this." Later that night, after Lucas was settled at home with his brothers hovering around him, Rosa found Grayson in the backyard. He was looking at the soccer goal the boys had made from old pipes. "They need to know," he said without turning around. "I can't keep pretending I'm just a friend of the family." "I know," Rosa admitted, "but we need to do it right. They're not ready for their world to change so completely." "Are you?" Grayson asked, finally looking at her. "Ready for things to change?" Rosa thought about how he'd carried Lucas, the fear and love in his eyes. How he'd held her hand in the hospital, how her heart raced every time he was near. "No," she said honestly, "but it's happening anyway, isn't it?" Before Grayson could answer, his phone rang. The caller ID showed his lawyer's name. "Excuse me," he said, stepping away to answer. Rosa watched him pace as he talked, his face growing darker with each passing moment. When he hung up, his hands were shaking. "What's wrong?" she asked. "My board of directors," he said. "They've called an emergency meeting. Someone leaked that I bought TechWave without consulting them. They're questioning my judgment, saying I'm distracted. They're threatening to remove me as CEO. What will you do?" Grayson looked at the house where his son slept. "I'll fight. I've spent my whole life building that company, but I won't leave Silver Cove. I won't leave them, or you." The way he said. Shoyo made Rosa's carefully built walls start to crumble, but she had her own secret weighing on her heart. The real reason she'd chosen to be his surrogate wasn't just admiration or kindness. She'd been in love with him back then, watching him suffer through his broken engagement, wanting to give him the family she knew he secretly longed for. Now, 12 years later, those feelings hadn't gone away. They'd only grown stronger, but telling him that truth could destroy everything they were slowly building. And with his company in trouble and the boys still in the dark, the timing couldn't be worse. The emergency board meeting was set for Friday. Grayson had 3 days to decide between the company he'd built and the family he'd just found, but life had other plans. Wednesday morning, Diego came running into the kitchen where Rosa was making breakfast. "Mom, look what I found." He was waving an old magazine. Rosa's heart sank when she saw the cover. It showed a younger Grayson standing next to medical equipment with the headline, "Tech Genius Grayson Lockwood Donates to Fertility Clinic." "It talks about him storing embryos," Diego said, his voice shaking. "Mom, the dates, they match." When we were born. Rosa dropped the spatula she was holding. Behind Diego, his brothers had gathered, all looking at her with questions in their eyes, Grayson's eyes. "I can explain," she started, but Lucas cut her off. "Is he our father?" Lucas asked directly. At 12, he'd always been the one who saw things most clearly. Before Rosa could answer, there was a knock at the door. Of course, Grayson would choose this moment to come by. He always visited before heading to the office. "Come in," Rosa called, Hout weakly. Grayson walked in, immediately sensing the tension. Then he saw the magazine in Diego's hands. "The clinic article," he said quietly. "I should have known someone would find it." "So it's true?" Mateo asked, his artist's eyes studying Grayson's face. "You're really our dad?" The room went silent. Rosa looked at Grayson, seeing the struggle in his eyes. They'd planned to tell the boys gently, to prepare them. Now everything was falling apart. "Yes," Grayson said finally. "I am your father, but I didn't know until I saw you playing soccer that day. There was a mistake at the clinic." "A mistake?" Santiago interrupted. "We're just a mistake." "No," Rosa and Grayson said together. "You're the most precious gift I never knew I had," Grayson continued. "Your mother, she gave me the greatest blessing of my life by raising you." "Then why didn't you want us?" Lucas demanded. "The article says you cancelled everything." "I was engaged back then," Grayson explained, moving closer to the boys. "When my fiancée left me, I was broken. I told the clinic to cancel everything. But there was a mix-up. They never got the message in time, and your mother—" He looked at Rosa with tears in his eyes. "Your mother chose to give you life, to raise you with all the love I should have given too. But now, you want to be our dad?" Diego asked. His voice was small, hopeful. "More than anything," Grayson said. The boys looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that only identical quadruplets could have. "We need time," Lucas said finally, "to think about this." "Of course," Grayson agreed. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." Just then, his phone buzzed. Another message about the board meeting. Rosa saw his face darken. "What's wrong?" she asked after the boys had gone upstairs. "The board meeting. They're not just threatening to remove me as CEO, they're saying I'm mentally unstable, making rash decisions. They've hired investigators. They might find out about the boys," Rosa realized with horror. "They already have." Grayson showed her his phone. There was a message from his lawyer with a photo attached. Someone had been following them, taking pictures of Grayson with the boys. "The press will be all over this," Rosa whispered. "The boys, they're not ready for that kind of attention." "I'll protect them," Grayson promised. "Whatever it takes." "How? By giving up your company?" "If I have to." He stepped closer to her. "Rosa, I've spent my whole life chasing success, thinking it would fill the emptiness inside me. But being here, with you and the boys, I finally feel complete." Rosa's heart thundered in her chest. "Grayson, I know you have feelings for me," he said softly. "I see it in your eyes when you look at me, the same way you used to look at me 12 years ago." Rosa stepped back, shocked. "You knew?" "Not then. I was too blind, too wrapped up in my own pain. But now I see everything clearly. You didn't just agree to be a surrogate because you're kind, you did it because you loved me." Tears filled Rosa's eyes. "It doesn't matter now." "It matters more than anything," Grayson said, reaching for her hand, "because I'm falling in love with you too." Before Rosa could respond, they heard a crash upstairs, followed by angry voices. The boys were fighting. As they rushed upstairs to deal with their son's crisis, both knew everything was about to change. The quiet life Rosa had built, the empire Grayson had created, none of it would ever be the same. And somewhere in New York, Grayson's board of directors was preparing to use his newfound family to destroy him, not knowing they were about to unleash a storm that would change everyone's lives forever. The morning newspapers hit Silver Cove like a bomb. "Tech billionaire's secret family revealed," screamed the headlines. Below were photos of the boys playing soccer, side by side with pictures of young Grayson. The resemblance was undeniable. "Don't open the blinds," Rosa told the boys at breakfast. Already, reporters were gathering outside their small house. "Mom, there are cameras everywhere," Mateo said, peeking through a crack in the curtains. Grayson burst through the back door, looking exhausted. He'd been up all night dealing with the press. "Pack your bags," he said. "All of you. It's not safe. Here anymore." "We're not running away," Lucas protested. His broken leg was propped up on a chair. "It's not running away," Grayson explained. "It's protecting our family. I have a beach house an hour from here, private, gated, with security, just until things calm down." Rosa looked around at her small home, at the life she'd built. "The boys have school. I've already arranged for their teachers to send their work. Please, Rosa, trust me." The way he said "trust me" made her heart ache, because she did trust him now more than she ever expected to. They managed to slip out through the back alley while Grayson's security team distracted the press out front. As they drove along the coast, Rosa watched her boys' faces. They were scared but trying to be brave. The beach house turned out to be a mansion, but not the cold showpiece kind. It was warm, with comfortable furniture and a huge kitchen. "I bought it years ago," Grayson explained as they settled in. "Whenever things got too crazy in New York, I'd come here to think. I never knew why it felt so empty until now." That afternoon, while the boys explored the house, Grayson's lawyer called. Rosa listened to his side of the conversation, watching. His face grew darker. "They're calling for an immediate vote," he said after hanging up. "Tomorrow morning. They're using the scandal to force me out." "What scandal?" Rosa demanded. "Having a family. They're saying I'm unstable, that finding out about the boys made me lose focus, that buying TechWave was just the beginning of my erratic behavior." He laughed bitterly. 20 years of making them millions, and this is how they repay me." "Then fight back," Rosa said fiercely. "Show them they're wrong." Grayson looked at her with wonder. "You know what that would mean? Going public with everything. The clinic mix-up, our story. The boys would be in the spotlight. They already..." Here came Lucas's voice from the doorway. He stood there on his crutches, his brothers behind him. They'd heard everything. "We've been talking," Lucas continued, "about you being our dad, about everything." Rosa held her breath. The boys had been so quiet since the truth came out. "And?" Grayson asked softly. "And we think..." Lucas looked at his brothers, who nodded. "We think that if you're going to fight, for us we should fight for you too." Diego stepped forward. "I read about your company online, about all the cool things you invented. They can't take that away from you." "They're just scared," Mateo added, "because you care about something more than money now." "You care about us," Santiago finished, Grayson's eyes filled with tears. He opened his arms, and for the first time his sons came to him for a hug. Rosa watched, her own eyes wet, as the 5 most important people in her life embraced. But their moment of peace was shattered by the sound of a helicopter approaching. "They found us," Grayson's security chief announced, rushing in. "And it's not just reporters. Ms. Victoria Stanford is here." "Who's Victoria Stanford?" Rosa asked, seeing Grayson's face pale. "The head of my board," he said, "and my ex-fiancé." Victoria Stanford stepped out of the helicopter like she was stepping onto a runway. Her designer suit probably cost more than Rosa's house. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she walked toward the front door. "She can't just show up here," Rosa protested. "Actually, she can," Grayson said grimly. "She owns part of this property. It was supposed to be our wedding gift to each other." The boys huddled closer to Rosa as Victoria walked in, her perfectly made-up face twisting into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Grayson, darling," she purred, "we need to talk about how to handle this little situation." The way she said "situation" while looking at the boys made Rosa's blood boil. But before she could speak, Grayson stepped forward. "No, Victoria," he said firmly. "You need to leave now." "Don't be foolish," Victoria snapped, her fake smile vanishing. "I'm here to help. We can spin this, make it go away." "Make it go away," Rosa interrupted, her voice shaking with anger. "These are his children, not some public relations problem." Victoria turned to her, eyes cold. "Ah, the maid who became a mother. How touching. Tell me, how much will it take? Name your price to disappear with these boys and never bother Grayson again." The sound of Rosa's slap echoed through the room. Victoria staggered back, hand to her cheek as Rosa stood her ground. "Get out," Rosa said, her voice deadly quiet. If you ever come near my children again—" "Your children?" Victoria laughed. "Don't you mean Grayson's mistakes?" "They're our children," Grayson said, moving to stand beside Rosa. "And you just made the biggest mistake of your life, Victoria. Tomorrow at the board meeting, we'll see who really controls Lockwood Technologies." As Victoria stormed out, Rosa turned to find all 4 boys grinning. "Mom," Diego said proudly, "that was awesome." But their victory was short-lived. Minutes later, Grayson's phone lit up with a message. His face went white as he read it. "Victoria's lawyers just filed for an emergency injunction," he said. "They're trying to freeze all my assets, including—" He looked at Rosa in horror. "Including my parental rights to the boys." The war for their family had just begun. Dawn broke over the beach house as Grayson paced the living room. He hadn't slept all night, going over documents with his lawyers on video calls. Rosa sat on the couch watching him wear a path in the carpet. "The board meeting starts in 3 hours," he said, checking his watch again. "Victoria's already turned half the board against me." "What about the injunction?" Rosa asked. The thought of losing custody of her boys made her sick to her stomach. "My lawyers are fighting it, but—" He stopped pacing and sat beside her. "Rosa, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said years ago." Before he could continue, Diego came running down the stairs. "Mom, Dad, come quick, you need to see this." They followed him to the media room where the other boys were watching the morning news. On the screen was Charlotte, Grayson's other ex-fiancée from before Victoria. "I knew about the embryos," Charlotte was saying to the reporter. "Grayson and I created them together, planning our future family. When things ended between us, he was supposed to destroy them. The fact that they exist, that these children exist, they're legally mine too." "Turn it off," Grayson ordered, but Lucas had already hit mute. "Is it true?" Lucas asked. "Is she really—" "No," Grayson said firmly. "Charlotte signed away all rights when we broke up. She's lying." "Then why is she doing this?" Mateo wondered. "Because Victoria put her up to it," Rosa realized. "She's trying to create as much chaos as possible before the board meeting." Grayson's phone rang. It was his lawyer again. "Charlotte's filed her own custody claim," he reported after the call. "Between her claim and Victoria's injunction, they're trying to take us away," Santiago said quietly. "Never," Rosa and Grayson said together. They looked at each other, and in that moment something shifted between them. "I'm done playing defense," Grayson announced. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Maria, it's Grayson Lockwood. Remember that story you wanted to write about? Me last year, I'm ready to talk. But we do this my way." An hour later, Maria Chen, the most respected journalist in tech reporting, arrived at the beach house. She listened as Grayson and Rosa told their story. The real story. "The clinic's records will confirm everything," Grayson explained. "The UA mix-up, the attempts to contact me, all of it. Rosa didn't steal anything from Charlotte. Those embryos were mine alone. And you're willing to go on record with all of this?" Maria asked. "Right before your board meeting?" "I'm done hiding," Grayson said. "My company, my fortune, none of it means anything compared to my family." Maria turned to Rosa. "And you? Are you ready for what this means? Your whole life will be public." Rosa looked at her boys, then at Grayson. "As long as we're together, we can handle anything." The story went live just as Grayson was preparing to leave for the board meeting. His phone immediately exploded with calls. "Victoria's furious," he reported, reading his messages. "Charlotte's already withdrawn her claim. She never expected the truth to come out." "Dad," Diego called from the stairs. All 4 boys stood there in their best clothes. "We want to go with you." "To the board meeting?" Grayson asked, surprised. "They're trying to say you're not fit to run the company because of us," Lucas said. "So let them meet us." Rosa's heart swelled with pride. Her boys, usually so playful, looked so grown up and determined. "If you're going, I'm going too," she said, standing up. Grayson looked at his family, the woman he loved and the sons he'd just found, all willing to fight for him. His eyes filled with tears. "There's something you all need to know first," he said. "Rosa, that night 12 years ago when you told me you were leaving, I was going to ask you to stay. Not as my maid, but because I had feelings for you. But I was too caught up in my own pain to say it." Rosa's hand flew to her mouth. "What?" "I've loved you since then," he continued. "I just didn't know it until I saw you with our boys. Everything I've achieved, everything I've built. It was all to fill the hole you left when you disappeared." The boys looked at each other, grins spreading across their faces. "Does this mean—" Diego started. "It means," Grayson said, taking Rosa's hand, "that if we win this fight, I want us to be a real family, all of us, together." But before Rosa could respond, Grayson's security chief burst in. "Sir, you need to see this," he said. Turning on the TV, breaking news scrolled across the screen. Someone had hacked Lockwood Technologies, releasing emails that seemed to show Grayson had known about the boys all along, that he'd paid Rosa to hide them. "The emails are fake," Grayson said immediately, seeing Rosa's shocked face. "Victoria must have—" "It doesn't matter if they're fake," his lawyer said over the phone. "The damage is done. The board meeting starts in 20 minutes, and now they have ammunition to remove you permanently." Rosa squeezed Grayson's hand. "Then we'll give them something else to talk about. Boys, get your tablets. Diego, remember that robot prototype you've been working on? Bring it." "Rosa, what are you planning?" Grayson asked. She smiled, a fierce light in her eyes. "We're going to show them exactly why the Lockwood family belongs in charge of Lockwood Technologies. The war wasn't over, but now they weren't just fighting for Grayson's company. They were fighting for their future. Together, the Lockwood Technologies." Boardroom fell silent as Grayson walked in with his family. Lucas hobbled on his crutches, but held his head high. The other boys flanked him protectively, each carrying tablets and, in Diego's case, a small robot. Victoria Stanford sat at the head of the table, her perfectly manicured nails drumming impatiently. "This is a closed board meeting," she announced. "Not a family reunion." "Actually," Grayson's lawyer interrupted, "as majority shareholder, Mr. Lockwood can bring anyone he chooses to this meeting." Rosa helped the boys set up their equipment while Grayson took his seat. The board members whispered among themselves, some pointing at the boys' obvious resemblance to their father. "We're here to discuss Mr. Lockwood's fitness to lead this company," Victoria began. "In light of recent revelations—" "You mean your fake emails?" Rosa interrupted. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Alvarez," Victoria said coldly, "this really doesn't concern—" "That's where you're wrong," Grayson cut in. "This concerns my entire family, and before you vote on my future, you're going to hear from them." He nodded to Diego, who stepped forward with his robot. The 12-year-old was nervous but determined. "This is Project Helper," he explained, turning on the small robot. "I built it after Lucas broke his leg, to help him carry things when he's on crutches." The robot whirred to life, rolling smoothly across the conference table. It extended an arm, gently picking up a water glass and bringing it to Lucas. "Impressive," one board member murmured. "The grip sensitivity—" "I used Dad's original robotic arm patents as a base," Diego continued, "but I modified the code to make it more responsive. See?" He pulled up his tablet, showing the programming. Several tech-savvy board members leaned forward, clearly interested. Mateo stepped up next. "And I designed the outer shell," he said, pulling up his digital artwork. "It needed to be friendly-looking but practical, like Dad's healthcare robots." "The market potential for a home healthcare assistant robot," another board member mused. "Exactly," Santiago jumped in. "I did the market research." He displayed graphs on his tablet. "There are 15 million people using crutches or canes in the US alone, and that's just one application." Victoria tried to interrupt, but Lucas spoke over her. "We're not just Grayson Lockwood's mistakes," he said firmly. "We're his legacy. Everything he built this company to be. Innovation, compassion, making the world better. We learned that from our mum. And now, we're learning how to turn those values into reality from our dad." Rosa felt tears in her eyes as she watched her. "Sons," they'd worked on this presentation all morning, determined to show the board who they really were. "This is all very touching," Victoria sneered, "but it doesn't change the fact that Mr. Lockwood hid these children." "He didn't hide us," all four boys said together. "My turn," Rosa stepped forward. 12 years ago I made a choice to give these boys life, to raise them with the values I saw in their father, even if he didn't know about them. And, yes, I worked as a maid, but I also have a degree in computer science from Mexico City University." This caused more murmurs around the table. Victoria's face darkened. I chose to be a surrogate because I believed in Grayson's vision, Rosa continued. Not just for this company, but for making technology that helps people. My boys grew up with that same vision. The only person trying to destroy it is you, Victoria. This is ridiculous, Victoria stood up. We have evidence. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway. You don't. Maria Chen walked in holding her tablet. The metadata from those emails proves they were created last week, and I have someone here who can tell us exactly who created them. Behind her stood Victoria's personal assistant, looking nervous but determined. Sarah, Victoria whispered, face going pale. What are you doing? Telling the truth, Sarah replied, about how you asked me to fabricate those emails, about how you've been working with Charlotte, about everything. The boardroom erupted in chaos. Victoria lunged for her phone, but Grayson's lawyer was faster. The SEC has already been notified, he said calmly. As have the police. Victoria looked around wildly, seeing her allies on the board backing away from her. You can't do this to me, she snarled at Grayson. After everything we had... We never had anything real, Grayson said quietly. I was just too blind to see it. The only real thing in my life is standing right here. He put his arm around Rosa. Hand the boys. I move for an immediate vote, said the eldest board member, glaring at Victoria, both on Mr. Lockwood's leadership and Ms. Stanford's removal from this board. Victoria grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, only to find 2 SEC agents waiting outside. The vote was unanimous. Not only would Grayson remain as CEO, but the board officially welcomed his family's involvement in the company's future. As they left the boardroom, Rosa held back tears of joy. But their victory celebration was cut short by an urgent call from the beach house security team. Sir, the guard said, his voice tense, someone broke into Miss Stanford's private office here at the house. They found something about Rosa's past that you need to see. Rosa's heart stopped. Her own secret, the one she'd kept buried for 12 years, was about to come to light. Whatever it is, Grayson said, seeing her face, we'll face it together. But even he couldn't have predicted the shocking truth that was about to change everything. They thought they knew about their story. The drive back to the beach house was tense. The boys, still excited from their victory at the board meeting, didn't notice how quiet Rosa had become. But Grayson did. He kept glancing at her, seeing the fear in her eyes. When they arrived, Grayson's security chief met them with a thick folder. We found this in a hidden safe in Victoria's office, he explained. She must have been saving it to use against you. Grayson opened the folder and started reading. His face went from confused to shocked. Rosa, is this true? Rosa looked at her sons, then back at Grayson. Boys, go upstairs, please. But Mom, they protested. Now, she said firmly. The boys reluctantly went upstairs, though everyone knew they'd be listening. You were never just my maid, Grayson said, still reading the documents. You worked for Eduardo Martinez. Rosa sank onto the couch. Yes, Eduardo Martinez, my uncle, the man who tried to steal your company 12 years ago. The memories came flooding back. Eduardo Martinez had launched a hostile takeover attempt of Lockwood Technologies when it was still young and vulnerable. He'd nearly succeeded. He sent you to spy on me, Grayson realized. That's why you took the job as my maid. Yes, Rosa whispered, but it's not what you think. Then tell me what to think. Grayson's voice rose. Because according to these documents, you were feeding him information about my company for months. I was, Rosa admitted. At first, Uncle Eduardo raised me after my parents died. I owed him everything. When he asked me to take the job, to report on your work, I didn't think I had a choice. But you stopped, Grayson said, reading further. 3 months before you left, the information stopped. Rosa stood up, walking to the window. Because I fell in love with you, the real you, not the cold businessman my uncle told me about, but the man who stayed up late working on robots to help sick children, the man who treated his employees like family. So you became a surrogate to, what? Make up for betraying me? No. Rosa turned back to him, tears streaming down her face. I became a surrogate because I saw how much you wanted a family with Charlotte, How devastated you were when she left. I thought I could give you that gift even if you never knew it was from me. But your uncle disowned me when I refused to help him destroy you. That's why I disappeared. He threatened to tell you everything, to use it to destroy your reputation. I couldn't let that happen. Grayson sat down hard, his mind spinning. All these years, I've wanted to tell you so many times, Rosa said. But how could I? How could I risk losing the boys? And now that we're finally together, are we? Grayson asked. How can we be together if everything was built on a lie? Not everything, came Lucas's voice from the stairs. All 4 boys stood there, having heard everything. Mom loves you, Mateo said. That's not a lie. And she protected you, Santiago added, from her own family. Diego walked over to his father. You always say that actions speak louder than words. Mom's actions prove who she really is. Grayson looked at his sons, so wise, so caring, just like their mother. There's more, the security chief interrupted quietly. About Eduardo Martinez. Rosa's head snapped up. What about him? He's here, in Silver Cove. He arrived this morning with Victoria. Suddenly, alarms started blaring throughout the house. Security cameras showed armed men approaching from full sides. Get the boys out of here, Grayson ordered his security team. No, Rosa grabbed his arm. Eduardo doesn't want the company anymore. He's too old, too sick. He wants revenge. On both of us. Both of us? For ruining his plans, for choosing love over family loyalty. Rosa looked terrified. He'll hurt the boys to punish us. The sound of breaking glass came from somewhere in the house. The security team was shouting. Shots were being fired. The panic room, Grayson decided. All of us now. They rushed to the hidden room just as Eduardo Martinez walked into the house. He was older now, walking with a cane, but his eyes still burned with the same hatred. Little Rosa, he called out, come say hello to your dear uncle and bring my great-nephews. We have so much catching up to do. Inside the panic room, Rosa held her boys close while Grayson worked the security systems, but they all knew the truth. This wasn't over. Victoria might have been defeated, but Eduardo Martinez had waited 12 years for his revenge, and he wouldn't stop until he destroyed the family that had finally found each other. As the sounds of intruders grew closer, Rosa looked at Grayson. I'm sorry, she whispered, for everything. Grayson took her hand. You protected our family once by leaving. Now we'll protect it together by standing our ground. But as Eduardo's men started cutting through the panic room's defenses, even Grayson wasn't sure how they would survive the night. The panic room's metal walls seemed to close in around them as Eduardo's men worked to break through. Lucas sat with his broken leg propped up, holding his brother's hands. Rosa couldn't stop pacing while Grayson worked frantically at the security console. The police are 12 minutes out, Grayson reported, but the doors won't hold that long. Let me talk to him, Rosa said suddenly. Eduardo raised me. Maybe. No, all 4 boys shouted together. He's not the uncle you knew anymore, Lucas said wisely. You heard him. He wants revenge. A loud bang made them all jump. The outer door was starting to give way. Rosa, mi sobrina. Eduardo's voice came through the walls. Are you going to hide in there forever? Like you've been hiding all these years? Rosa looked at her sons, then at Grayson. In that moment, she knew what she had to do. The ventilation shaft, she said quietly. It leads to the beach. The boys can fit through it. We're not leaving. You, Diego protested. Listen to me. Rosa knelt in front of her sons. You are the best things I've ever done in my life, but I've been running from my past for too long. It's time to face it. Grayson grabbed her arm. Rosa, no. We face this. Together, another bang. The door wouldn't last much longer. Mum, Mateo said suddenly. Your phone, it's still broadcasting. Everyone turned to look at Rosa's phone on the table. In their rush to the panic room, she'd never ended the video call from the board meeting. Maria Chen and the entire board of Lockwood Technologies had been watching everything unfold. And we're not the only ones, Santiago added, checking his own phone. Diego's robot presentation went viral. The whole world is watching. As if to confirm this, all their phones started buzzing with news alerts. Amateur videos showed Eduardo's men breaking into the house. Social media was exploding with support for the Lockwood family. "Eduardo," Grayson said, grabbing the panic room's intercom. "It's over. The whole world can see what you're doing. Victoria's already in custody. Stop this now." "You think I care about witnesses?" Eduardo laughed. "I've waited 12 years to destroy what you love like you destroyed what I loved." "You destroyed it yourself," Rosa shouted back. "You chose hate over family. You chose revenge over love. But I chose love, Tio. I chose it then, and I choose it now." The banging stopped. For a moment, there was silence. "Love?" Eduardo spat the word. "Love made you betray your own blood?" "No," Rosa said firmly. "Love made me save an innocent man from your hatred. Love made me give these boys life. Love brought us all together." "And love will destroy you," Eduardo snarled. "Break down that door." But suddenly, new voices filled the house. Police sirens wailed outside. Through the security cameras, they could see Eduardo's men starting to flee. "FBI, drop your weapons." Eduardo stood alone now, staring at the panic room door with wild eyes. "You think this is over, Rosa? You think you've won?" "It was never about winning," Rosa said softly. "It was about doing what's right." The FBI burst in, surrounding Eduardo. As they handcuffed him, he seemed to age 20 years. The powerful man who had haunted Rosa's nightmares was just a bitter old man now. When the panic room door finally opened, Rosa found herself surrounded by her family. The boys hugged her tight while Grayson held them all. "I thought," Rosa started, crying. "I thought when you learned the truth about my past, about Eduardo—" "Mom," Lucas interrupted. "Did you really think anything could make us stop loving you?" "For you protected Dad's company," Diego added. "You protected us all these years," Mateo said. "And now we protected each other," Santiago finished. Grayson turned Rosa to face him. "Your past doesn't matter. What matters is our future." As the police led Eduardo away, reporters gathered outside. The beach house. The story of the tech billionaire's secret family had become even bigger with this dramatic showdown. "What do we do now?" Rosa asked, watching the media circus through the windows. Grayson smiled. "Now? Now we stop hiding. We tell our story, the real story, about how love can heal any wound, bridge any gap, and build something stronger than hate ever could." "Together?" Rosa asked. "Together," Grayson promised, kissing her softly. The boys pretended to gag at their parents kissing, but their smiles gave them away. After 12 years of secrets and separation, the Lockwood family was finally whole. But as they prepared to face the press, none of them could have predicted the final surprise that awaited them, one that would test their newfound happiness in ways they never imagined. 6 months had passed since the night Eduardo was arrested. The Lockwood family had become America's favorite story, their journey from secrets to love capturing hearts across the country. The beach house, once a hideout, was now their home. Rosa stood in the kitchen, watching through the window as Grayson taught the boys how to grill. Lucas's leg had healed, and all 4 boys were running around the yard, their laughter carrying on the ocean breeze. "Mrs. Lockwood?" Their housekeeper Maria came in with the mail. "There's a letter from the prison." Rosa's hands shook as she opened it. Eduardo had been writing to her every week, but she'd never opened his letters. This time something felt different. "What is it?" Grayson asked, coming in from the patio. He could always sense when she was troubled. "Eduardo, he's dying," Rosa whispered. "Cancer. He has weeks left, and he's asking to see the boys." "Absolutely not," Grayson started, but Rosa touched his arm. "He's still their great uncle, and he's the only connection to my parents they have left." Before they could discuss it further, Diego burst in. "Mom! Dad! Come quick! Someone's here!" They rushed outside to find an elderly woman standing in their driveway. She was elegant, with silver hair and Grayson's green eyes. "Mother." Grayson breathed. Eleanor Lockwood had disappeared from Grayson's life 20 years ago, after his father's death. She'd never approved of his tech dreams, wanting him to run the family's old money investment firm instead. "I saw you on the news," Eleanor said softly. My grandsons, I had to come." The boys huddled behind their parents, unsure about this new grandmother, but Rosa saw something in Eleanor's eyes: regret, hope, love. "Why now?" Grayson demanded. "After all these years?" "Because I was wrong," Eleanor said simply. "About everything. Watching you with your family, seeing how you've grown. I'm so proud of you, son." Tears filled Grayson's eyes. Another wound from the past, finally healing. That evening they had a family dinner like no other. Eleanor shared stories about Grayson's childhood, making the boys laugh. They saw where their father got his determination, his drive to prove himself. After dinner, Rosa made a decision. "We should visit Eduardo," she said. "All of us." "Are you sure?" Grayson asked. "Life's too short for hatred," Eleanor said wisely. "I learned that the hard way." The next day they went to the prison hospital. Eduardo lay in his bed, a shadow of the powerful man he'd been. When he saw the boys, tears rolled down his weathered cheeks. "They look just like your father," he told Rosa. "Mi hermanos, I've spent so many years angry about losing him. I almost lost you too." "Almost," Rosa agreed, taking his hand. Eduardo looked at Grayson. "I was wrong about you. You gave my Rosa what I never could, a real family." "She gave me the same gift," Grayson replied. 2 weeks later, they buried Eduardo under a clear blue sky. The boys placed roses on his grave, forgiving him in death in a way they never could in life. Life moved forward. The boys excelled in school, their unique blend of Rosa's compassion and Grayson's innovation leading to amazing achievements. Diego's helper robot went into production, helping thousands of people. Mateo's designs won awards. Santiago's market research helped the company expand. Lucas became the leader everyone knew he would be. 1 year to the day after their story began, Rosa stood in Jefferson Park, watching a new group of children play soccer. Grayson wrapped his arms around her from behind, his wedding ring glinting in the sunlight. "Any regrets?" he asked. "Only that we wasted so much time," she answered. "No time was wasted," he said. "Everything that happened led us here, to this moment." Eleanor sat on a nearby bench, teaching the boys to play chess, making up for lost time with her grandsons. They were healing the past while building the future. "Mom, Dad," Diego called out, "come look." He held up his tablet, showing them the news. Lockwood Technology's latest innovation, a family of healthcare robots designed by all 4 boys, had just been approved by the FDA. The headline read, "Lockwood Legacy Continues. Next Generation Leads the Way." Rosa looked at her family. Her sons, her husband, her mother-in-law. Love had brought them together, truth had tested them, and forgiveness had made them stronger. "You know what this means?" Grayson said, grinning at his sons. "Time for a family board meeting." The boys groaned, but their eyes sparkled. These meetings always ended with ice cream. As they walked home together, Rosa remembered the scared young maid who'd made a choice 12 years ago. A choice that had changed so many lives. "I love you," she told Grayson. "All of this, it was worth everything." "Even the hard parts?" he asked. "Especially the hard parts," she said. They led us home. Above them, the sun set over Silver Cove, painting the sky in colors of hope and promise. The Lockwood family had found their happy ending, but really it was just the beginning. After all, love stories like theirs never truly end. They just keep growing, one day at a time, proving that the greatest fortune isn't measured in dollars or success, but in the hearts we touch and the lives we change. And somewhere, on a cloud far above, Rosa's parents and Grayson's father smiled, down on the family they'd never met, but had somehow helped create. Because love in all its forms has a way of coming full circle. The end.